That was a time that I look and it brought me shame. I look at those pictures, I don't even recognize that person anymore. I just see the weight and the bondage that I was under.
Hey friends, this is the Next Level Glam podcast, and I'm Glam Gal. Thank you for joining me as I discuss all things transformation, inside and out, with my sisters in Christ. Pull up a chair, it's about to go next level.
Hi, friends. Welcome back to the Next Level Glam podcast. Now that we've laid the foundation in the first episode, the gospel, being set free of the traditions of men, staying in the simplicity that we have in Christ, also teaching ourselves in the mind to accept that truth and rest in His grace as we venture to grow in that grace, to grow in Him, grow in the knowledge of Him. As Paul writes in Ephesians, for by grace are you saved through faith. And that not of ourselves, it is the gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast. We have that spiritual truth inside of us with the freedom that grace gives us and the sound mind that He gives us. Let's lean into that a little bit and what that can mean in terms of the physical. For as much as we are spiritual beings, we are in the physical realm. We are not of the world, but we are in it. Therefore, it's very natural that we have struggles in this life. One of the struggles that popped into my mind to talk about on this podcast is the struggle of our self-image. This is a common struggle out there in the world. And just because you're a believer doesn't mean that you don't experience this as well. The point is, a lot of us have a hard time looking in the mirror and liking what we see. What came to mind for the title of this podcast episode was called The Mirror Has Two Faces, but it's a movie that is one of my favorites. And here's a quick recap. Okay, so there's this lady, she's older and single. She's kind of plain and basic and basically overlooked. And she has a mom and a sister who are like the complete opposite of her and just seem to be more beautiful in the physical. It's like she's the odd man out, and she comes across this situation where she has to find out, like, what is her issue? You know what I mean? Where did this all stem from? This feeling of not being good enough or pretty enough. And she feels it really stemmed from like her childhood. It can be hard for us to admit to people in our lives that have played kind of a villainous role. For some people, like in my own life, they play the hero and the villain. And sometimes you just have to throw the chips up in the air and see where they fall, to get to the bottom of what the deal is. Where did my first issues arise feeling like I wasn't enough on the outside or lacking or not appreciating the reflection that I saw? What came to mind was actually pretty much the birthplace of this podcast. It started off with this being brought to mind. But, when I was little, I asked my mom what I was like as a baby. Honestly, I was less than enthused about what she told me, which was that I was pretty difficult. And she kind of referenced the ugly duckling bit. Have you ever heard that story? The ugly duckling story is about this duckling that's considered ugly. It stands out from the rest of the group, and it takes a lot of abuse basically at the hands of the ones around them. They don't fit in. And at the end of it, you realize it really wasn't an ugly duckling all along as it bloomed into a beautiful swan. So that's what my mom would tell me, is that one day I would turn into this beautiful swan. And it really stuck with me throughout the years, but more of the ugly duckling part and not so much the beautiful swan part. I just felt like at that very young age that I was going to be up for a wild transformation. So once we've established kind of like where your initial vulnerability or your insecurity stemmed from, we kind of need to see what it's led us to. It kind of requires us to do a self-assessment of sorts. I can honestly tell you, though, without the inner transformation, I wasn't even able to look at myself in the mirror. Like, honestly, it was too painful. I like to hide in certain clothes in the dark. I like to hide in cleverly devised angles in my selfies. Anything but the real. Anything but to look at what was really going on, kind of do the sugar-coated version for myself. There was a time in my life where I did this boudoir shoot with my husband. It was about the time that I had just been saved, and I won this free boudoir shoot. And I knew that obviously I wasn't in prime condition, but I just felt compelled to do it, face the beast, as they say. I got those results back, those pictures back. And of course, you want to look on the surface level and just accept and be like, that's who you are, like make peace with it. But I can honestly tell you that I was not okay with what I was seeing on any level. A lot of people like to say is fake it till you make it. But really, what I've heard and it stuck with me is face it till you make it. And that's kind of what I feel like is next. Once you start looking in the eye of the initial downfall of what made you feel less than, looking at it and evaluating where it's brought you and facing that beast. At this point in my journey, I had gone on many different cycles of trying to get it together, chasing the ideal and coming up short, throwing my hands up in the air and quitting, always coming back to square one, if not ending up in the red. When I saw these results, it's like a mark in time. I remember telling myself that I was done. I was going to get serious about myself. I was going to give myself a shot. I was going to bet on myself. I wanted to use my faith as a stepping stone and allow myself to invest in myself, whether that's energy, time, self-care, any kind of improvement in my life. I wanted to give myself the green light and be like, yes, it's time to invest in you. I just couldn't come into agreement that this version of me was acceptable. It's like pictures don't lie. It's interesting because we live in a society where a lot of us have heard the expression, you're beautiful just the way you are. Initially, it sounds like a good thing, but it's not true for all of us anyways. I don't like to speak for everyone, but I feel like a lot of us could probably agree with that. Although obesity has been around for a few decades, over the last 10 years alone, we've built this platform for this plus size industry. And although you have me in the corner that there are many different bodies out there, and that beauty is in the eye of the beholder, it was on a platform to normalize, despite the fact that we couldn't see all the disorders. We don't see the mental anguish these people go through, whether they're on the, skinny side all the way to the opposite side. We don't see their health issues, their body struggles, or just the day-to-day struggles of being possibly trapped in a body that can't serve you in the way that it should. For me personally, I didn't get to a stage of real obesity until like my late teens, early 20s. But what that ended up doing to me was give me body dysmorphia, health issues, the destruction of my temple. You can use your imagination what I mean. If you've gained weight, you know what I'm talking about. Something had to change. I knew that I could continue living my life in self-hatred and condemnation, and I could pretend that's just how it is and this is just how I am. That's a choice that we all have. Stay stunted or grow. And there may be even times in our walk where we choose to regress. We choose to even like ungrow and go back to old coping mechanisms that don't edify us anymore. And we have to relearn cycles with boundaries with ourselves about certain things. But this is why his grace is so important to stay, because the more that you're lashing yourself and up your own butt about things, the worse and more bondage that you're going to get into. We really need to understand that we have liberty to figure it out, that, we can try again, pick ourselves up by our bootstraps and keep moving. Our attitude as believers is that there is hope ahead. There was like this nagging that I was called for more, that I didn't have to accept the status quo, that it wasn't too late, and that it was time to start on the process that I had dreamed for myself many, many moons ago. I started to let God into those very vulnerable places in my heart and in my desires, being honest with myself, being honest with Him, because we can't hide from God, right? Like there's nowhere to go. As much as I felt shame and regret and disappointment about where I had been and where I was currently at, I actually had the gumption to bear it all and stand in the mirror and let Him speak to me about what I was seeing, how to process it without wanting to jump out the window. And what do I mean by that? I mean, I saw evidence of self-hate, emotional traumas, um, the result of years of bullying, my ignorance, the results of my self-soothing. Some things I had zero control over, other things I most definitely had control over, but it was time to hand it all over, get off of autopilot, and change the outcome that I was headed for at that time. I had to make moves in faith that He was going to show up on the other side of my fear. If you're ready to make moves to change the outside shell that we have, taking pictures are immensely helpful. I know it's a dreaded task. I totally understand, but it's just so imperative to make a landmark for yourself of your starting point. And knowing from that point that it's going to get better. You have a starting place now to look back on. If you're too scared to do the pictures, you can definitely start by doing measurements. Take it seriously. Take yourself seriously. I think what's important is that you have goals for yourself. What are your goals for what you would like to see reflecting at you in the mirror? Perhaps in alignment with what you feel like is on the inside, maybe like seeing or finding a newfound confidence. Maybe it comes with losing weight, gaining weight, maintaining weight. Maybe it has something to do with toning up or clear skin. Maybe it's about softening up. Maybe it's about getting that six pack. Maybe it's arms that are strong enough to lift both of your babies without too much a struggle. Or perhaps even thighs that could choke a bear, as Blanche from Golden Girls likes to say. Maybe for you, it's at being at the size where you're eating as you feel led to eat and not berating yourself for every calorie consumed. Maybe for you, it's being more mindful of what you're consuming. All of these ring a bell for me. Honestly, I relate to a lot of those. I really wanted to be that somebody who got up every single day and faced that beast, that person that I didn't want to be on the outside anymore, and showing up every day to smash that into the ground. So, I'm a barber, and a lot of times in our consult, we'll ask our client, what don't you like about your hair? I did the same with my own evaluation as I was standing there looking in the mirror. For me personally, I wanted drastic. There is nothing too big for God. With man, it's impossible, but with God, all things are possible. I can laugh and be real with you that list that I named off to my head about things that I wanted to change, it was very long. It was very long. Areas that I would like to see improvement. And I think that in itself is key, that we're after improvement, progress, and not perfection. Perfection in the physical doesn't exist. I don't know how many times we have to hear that. So if it's not perfection, set a new goal. I know for myself, my goals have changed many times on this journey. The bar keeps getting raised. Remind yourself daily, guys, that you are a new creation in Christ. We're called to move mountains with our faith, y'all. And those mountains are personal to each one of us and completely purposeful. If you're somebody who's ready to stop dodging yourself in the mirror, you're at a place where you want to start recognizing yourself in the mirror, I encourage you to take a deep look into how you got to the situation that you're in, self-assessment, where you're at, document it, being okay with that being your starting point. Whether it's a pair of jeans, whether it's a picture, whether it's measurements, do it, get it solidified. Just recently, before I launched this podcast, I released a reel, and it was very vulnerable of me to share. It was a whole slew of pictures from when I first started making, changes to my physical, exposing where I was at. And I would have liked to keep those hidden forever. Let's just be real. That was a time that I look and it brought me shame. I look at those pictures. I don't even recognize that person anymore. I just see the weight and the bondage that I was under. But I wanted to share the journey has brought me so far, knowing that I have more to accomplish. But I want people to understand that I know it's hard in the moment to face what we don't like about ourselves. But it's absolutely necessary to go to the next level. You can't keep living in your own delusion. You need to get into reality. No matter how painful it is, you have to if you want change to happen. And as much as I wish that person in that reel didn't exist and that I could erase her, there are moments where I realize that I wouldn't be who I am today if I wouldn't have faced those challenges and how far that I've come. It gives me encouragement to keep going. You can't give up on yourself. Based on my prior episodes, that how God sees us is absolutely essential, but how we see ourselves matters too. It's just a part of life. And someone like me who was tired of being harassed by my own inner thoughts or by the enemy about certain things that I felt stuck to, I got tired of it. So part of this journey really is our relationship with our self-image. I don't see myself as the ugly duckling anymore. I refuse to accept that label of being an ugly duckling. I want to be the beautiful swan, and there's no shame in it. When we add to what already exists with God, it's just like a bonus. We want to be on the same page as God, but we also want to keep it real. What things or events of your past have shaped your present reality? Can you give yourself grace for where you are today? Do you have goals that excite you? Or do you struggle to dare for more? Thanks for joining me today, guys. I so appreciate you guys tuning in. Please join me next time on the Next Level Glam podcast, where we discuss one of those obstacles that likes to rise up when we go after for more: patience. Can we give it to ourselves? Catch me over on Instagram at the Next Level Glam podcast. Until then, guys, grow in His grace.